I request everyone to please be seated. The seminar will be starting in a few more minutes. I request everyone to please put their masks on. This is a compulsion. And after the seminar is over, there will be a questionnaire round. I request everyone to ask their doubts or questions about ISS. And do not hesitate to ask them and think that it's a silly question. Please do ask them. For people watching this session live, you can ask your questions down in the comments below. We'll convey your questions and get them clarified as soon as possible.
A very good evening to one and all present here. I am Saujanya. I would like to extend my greetings to all the dignitaries and students present over here. We received a tremendous response to the first day lecture on International Space Station. Dr. M.Y.S. Prasad indulged us in the most inspiring and significant lecture that enlightened us on the concepts like fundamentals of orbiting, the theory of human physiology, and limitations of space flight. The talk on ISS configuration, its technical specifications, and the unique features of ISS left us spellbound. The visual presentation on the assembled details of ISS gave us a magnificent insight about its placement in space. The fascinating visual of Sunita Williams explaining about the life in the International Space Station encouraged us to see the things from a different perspective and understand the struggles faced by the persons, benefits of mankind. Today, in the second day lecture on International Space Station, we will be having another interesting talk, which will be covering the heritage of earlier space stations, launch vehicles used for ISS assembly missions, details of access to the space station, and activity of the crew. Get ready to dive into the most inspiring and fascinating lecture by Padma Shri Dr. M.Y.S. Prasad. So hereby, I invite Dr. M.Y.S. Prasad to deliver his lecture on today's topic. Sir, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have 2 more minutes, so we'll start after 2 minutes, okay? For those of you who missed yesterday's lecture, this is a cover slide designed by one of my former colleagues from MCF, Mr. Chandrasekhar, where the space station is just coming out from the daytime into the night. This is the black space, and these things represent the launches for taking modules, crew transportation, assembly operations, and extravehicular activities outside the space station and the research, all aspects of the International Space Station. Now, this is also purely educational purpose, and this, all the material in this are taken from the materials which are available in public domain, both mainly NASA documents and the books and articles, and also YouTube videos related to space station. Now, okay, this is the International Space Station, which is 419 tons in mass, orbiting at an altitude of 400 kilometers above Earth, and at an inclination of 51.6 degrees. So it will be making about 15 to 16 revolutions per day around the Earth, and this is a project of 5 space agencies: NASA of USA, Roscosmos of Russia, ESA of 11 European countries, JAXA of Japan, and CSA of Canada. So the 5 space agencies together have built this space station over 13 years, from 1998 to 2011. 2011 was the last launch for assembly purpose, and this was built at a cost of $100 billion US, which is roughly at current rates 7 lakh crores rupees. That means they have spent roughly 70,000 crore per year, all these countries put together. And this is the work of more than 50 to 60,000 engineers and scientists all over the world, literally from all over the world, working for this station modules, assembly, and the research operations. Now, this is very clearly not a program of India or not a program of ISRO. This lecture series I have planned only to celebrate 20 years of continuous human presence in space on board the space station. The first crew went on 2nd November 2000, and this November 20 years is completed, and 20 years without any interruption, continuously there was crew on this space station. And this is a multi-element space station, with this portion being the Russian orbital segment, and the remaining portion is the US orbital segment, which is having the research stations of US and European Space Agency's Columbus, and Japanese experimental modules and laboratories, and a big structure called interstage truss structure, on which the solar panels are assembled, which will provide the power required. So this is called the Russian orbital segment, and the remaining is called US orbital segment. So with this quick introduction, we'll go into today's topic. Next. Now, I would like to give you the heritage, because this space station even though it took 13 years to build, has not come suddenly. It is over so many years. From 1970 onwards, Russia was launching space stations. This is the Salyut space station, and the Russians have launched between 1971 and 82, 11 years. They have launched about 7 Salyut space stations. Each one is a single module of 20 tons, and this module can have the crew which can go and attach here and then work here and then come back. These 7 space stations, you must be wondering why I am talking about 1970 and 80 Russian work. You will see, even today in the International Space Station to sustain, it is the work which was done in between 70 and 1980 on Salyut space stations which has contributed a lot. Now, in the beginning there were problems, okay, and all Salyuts were about 20 tons weight, and 20-ton mass spacecraft can be launched at that time only by Proton launch vehicle. Proton launch vehicle can take a 20-ton satellite and put it in orbit at 51.6 degrees inclination. The inclination is very important because the Cosmodrome in Russia is at 45.6 degrees latitude. From that, the minimum inclination you can get is only 51.6 degrees. So, these space stations in the beginning, they had lot of problems. In the first few, there were Proton launch vehicle failures in which 2 Salyuts were lost, and another Salyut, Salyut 2 especially, after putting into orbit, within 2 weeks it lost attitude and completely got depressurized, and they had to abandon it. And like that problems, and at least there were 4 times the spacecraft went and couldn't dock, with the crew it couldn't dock, and after docking attempt failed, they have returned back without joining the space station. But still, the Salyut space station has got some of the important achievements done. They are basically, the Salyut space station were named in the beginning by Russia as DOS, that is Durable Orbital Station. Durable Orbital Station 1, 2, 3 like that they have built. And surprisingly, you will see this original design is done by the greatest space engineer of the world, Korolev. And DOS 7 had become the core module of the next generation space station Mir, and DOS 8, which was from the same Salyuts, had become the core stage for the current International Space Station. That is why I said we should know the heritage, when these things were designed, how they were designed, and how these things have reached this level. Especially these 2 space stations, Salyut 6 and Salyut 7, have provided very long duration space stay. Now, all these 7 space stations put together, manned days in the space are equal to roughly 1697, not roughly, exactly 1697. Out of that, almost 1500 have come from only these 2 space stations. And these 2 space stations, for Salyut 6, first time, they have added, instead of 1 docking module, 2nd docking sphere, in which 1 more can come and dock. That means a crew can go and dock from behind, and crew can go into the space station. Another crew can come and dock in the front and also join them. Or another Progress mission can come and dock there and can transfer all the items like food, water, oxygen, everything to them. That was very important thing. Important step in the Salyut 6 and 7 was to create forward and backward docking stations. That is the importance of this. In addition, in the Salyut 6 program, what they have done is the same Soyuz craft which takes the crew to the space station, they have modified to make it unmanned cargo spacecraft called Progress. Today, Progress makes 3 to 4 launches every year to supply the cargo to the International Space Station. So the core module of the present International Space Station, which is called the Zvezda spacecraft, is coming from the DOS-8 of Salyut program, and the Progress unmanned spaceship, which takes the items to the spacecraft, is also coming from the Salyut. This is the achievement of this. And then actually these two put together have hosted almost about more than about 30 crews. So some of them permanent, some of them are coming and then going back after meeting the space team. Now back. Okay. This is the onboard view of the space station, Salyut 7. As you can see, it is quite crowded, and the people who are of course staying for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month like that, and they work there and they live there, and of course quite compressed because there is not much area, maybe something like between 5 to 10 meter cube of the area inside. But then the next step, when the Salyut was changed, it was converted into multiple docking ports and multi-elements can be docked to that. The next was the birth of Mir space station. In the Mir space station, what USSR has done was to take the core from the Salyut, which is here. This is the core from the Salyut, which is called DOS-7, that is Durable Orbital Station 7, built from Salyut, which has got one docking module at the aft and a docking sphere on which 4 elements can be docked in the front. So the moment all these elements have come into picture, it has become a 6-element configuration. And a 6-element configuration, of course, took time to build. It has taken right from 1986, the first core element, to 87, 89, 95, 90 and 95. Finally, between 1986 and 1995, over 9 years it was built. And it was built and it is 130 ton. You can see the jump. The Salyut station, each one was 20 ton orbiting the Earth, whereas the Mir station was 130 tons, which was orbiting the Earth, and there were 10 years of assembly of this. Then it has got very interesting history. Some of the very interesting histories, of course, these are all the launches and assembly. But what happened was, on one of the missions, there was a fire. There was a fire in the Mir space station. There was a candle, they call candle, which burns and generates oxygen, in addition to electrolysis of water. So that suddenly gave a big flame, and it started spreading that. It's called actually potassium superoxide candle, which when it burns gives the oxygen out. And it started just a big flame, and one of the cosmonauts, when he came back, when he was asked in the BBC interview, what was your first reaction? He said, my first reaction was to open the window because there was a lot of smoke. And then I realized there is no window, this is all sealed one. And then they were wondering what to do, and to the flame on the other side was their Soyuz module, into which they can escape. And this side was another Soyuz module. Luckily, of course, it was a mission when the American team also came there, and first thing the captain has done is, because Soyuz can take only 3 people, he had taken first 3 Americans and asked them to get into the Soyuz to be ready to go, and closed the hatches. And then, of course, the fire subsided and they all survived. Then it brought out lot of problems. And in the earlier phase, in the Salyut, there were two failures which have happened which were terrible. The very first astronaut to salute 1, when he was coming back, his parachutes didn't open properly and he died on landing. And the second one was on the salute team, one of the orbital teams, I'm sorry, it was before salute. The first, the salute 1 first crew, when they were returning, a valve which was to vent the carbon dioxide, when it is operated, it did not close, and suddenly while on the re-entry path, the whole cabin became depressurized. As I told you yesterday, maintaining a cabin at the sea atmosphere level is essential for the crew, otherwise they cannot survive. At that time, while the astronauts were going into space and coming back and working, they were always in the ordinary dress. They were not wearing the suits. And because this sudden depressurization, if a sudden depressurization happens and outside is vacuum, the maximum time a human being can survive is 14 seconds. So all three of them are dead by the time they landed. When they went for recovery, all the three were dead. So these were the two fatal accidents of the salute period. And then when it came to Mir biggest thing was the fire. And then another one was one of the missions to supply, which was called Progress M34. When it was going, it missed docking and it went and hit a solar panel and hit a side of the station. And again it got depressurized. Luckily, the commander closed the door between that portion which got hit and the remaining portion, and all of them survived, and they left that at that stage. Afterwards, they didn't use that lab. So, finally, after 15 years of work, in March 2001, the Mir station is deorbited. Totally in the Mir, continuously, crew were there for 7 days, less than 10 years. That was the record at that time. So there were salutes, 7 salutes, each 20 tons. Then there is a Mir which was 130 tons, and number of, they have become from a single module to multi-module space station, and a crew of small number to crew of bigger number. And that was the time they were planning another big thing. The former USSR was planning another big thing called Mir 2. This is the Mir 2 design. Now you see how close this is to International Space Station. There is a boom, a continuous boom or a beam, and at the one end of it are the solar panels, and the other end also there were solar panels cum radiators and multiple modules, and the modules being connected. So this is the plan of USSR at the time of 1990. They were planning an International Space Station called Mir 2, which weighs 450 tons. And it will consist of 5 modules, each one 90 tons. So 5 launches, 5 modules and connecting them. That was their plan. That was the time when Soviet Union had got into trouble, and then the moment USA understood that there is, and parallelly USA was planning a post-shuttle era a space station, and the space station design was going on from 1980 onwards, and it was called Freedom Space Station. Before that, they had maybe about 100 to 200 days of experience in the manned missions and space station. But the biggest thing they were planning was the Freedom Space Station. The moment they realized that the Mir 2 design is available and the Russians' economy doesn't allow them to go forward, Americans jumped into it. This is what yesterday I told you. The discussion started between US and former USSR or Russia in 1994, which they have finalized the configuration. They have finalized the configuration of International Space Station, which I was showing you yesterday and today. Next. Now, for this International Space Station, now this is the heritage. With this heritage started in 1998, the International Space Station, 1998 to 2011, 13 years is the assembly phase. For this assembly, what is required is, you have to take different modules to the space, 400 kilometer altitude into the orbit, and then you have to assemble them, and then you have to start sending the crew and bring them back safely. This is the total thing. So for that, what is used is, for the assembly, they have used the launch vehicles Proton of Russia and Space Shuttle of US, and for transporting of the modules, they used Proton, Space Shuttle, Ariane 5, H2A and H2B, and for crew transport, they used Soyuz and Space Shuttle, both of them. And when the Space Shuttle was retired permanently at 2011 to 2020, practically it is only Soyuz which was transporting crew to the International Space Station and back. And for supplies, Progress, HTV, ATV, and recently, very recently, 1 month back, the first commercial crew vehicle of a private company in US had taken, after the last space shuttle, a crew to the International Space Station. This is the vehicles which are used. Now, as you see them here, this is a Soyuz launch vehicle. This is one of the best launch vehicles in the world. Then there is a Proton. This Soyuz is used basically to transport the crew and also to basically crew Soyuz. Spacecraft also is named Soyuz, and launch vehicle also is named Soyuz, and also the supply vehicle module called Progress. And the Proton is used basically to launch Zarya and also Zvezda, which are the core modules of the. In fact, Zarya came from another program of US called Almaz, and it was Almaz design which was just manufactured and made Zarya, and they made, that is the first sub-assembly of the International Space Station. Then came the Zvezda, which was DOS 8, that is Durable Orbital Station 8, which was as per the Salyut designs. Then these were launched by the Proton, because Proton is the only vehicle which can launch 20 tons at that time into the 51.6 degrees inclination 400 kilometers orbit. H2B is used for the Japanese modules to launch, that is both HTV and also the Kibo module. And the Ariane 5 of Europe is used to launch only the ATV, that is the Ariane transport vehicle, to transport the water, fuel and all other things to the space, not the crew. And the space shuttle, which is an excellent mission, which had excellent history, and it's again another engineering marvel, which had launched so many stations for the assembly to the ISS. Next. Now, the Proton launch vehicle at takeoff, its mass is 705. Proton has got different versions varying from 695 tons to 705 tons. When it lifts off at 705 tons, it takes a satellite which is 23 tons into low Earth orbit. And it has so far, it had 425 launches with 378 success. It's a very good launch vehicle. And another important thing is, the whole launch vehicle, the first stage, the second stage and third stage, all the stages are having propellants called hypergolic. That is the N2O4 and the UDMH. N2O4 is nitrogen tetroxide, UDMH is unsymmetric dimethyl hydrazine. These two liquids, when they come together, you do not need any spark plug or you do not need anything. They are called hypergolic. They immediately combustion will start. So, but they are also highly toxic. Even a few 50 milligrams leaks, lot of people will die. So that type of propellants are used in this launch vehicle, and this vehicle, launch vehicle's failures between 425 and 378 are mostly in the beginning during salute period. Lot of salute period proton, and for the space station time, during the space station time, Proton M had 111 launches, out of which 100 are successful, but 11 are failure. Next. Now this is the Proton launch vehicle. As you can see, it is brought horizontally because everything is liquid propellant. So the whole thing is only the structure. So it is brought horizontally, elevated it, and after elevation, the propellants are filled, and then of course the satellite will be assembled in this place even before coming, and then it will be launched. At this place, it will be either Zvezda or Zarya or whatever it wants to take. The 20 tons will be here. Okay, and this is the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Russia. Now, this launch vehicle, first launch was 1965. That means it's for 55 years it is serving. It is not just a few years back. 55 years it is serving. In fact, same when we come to Soyuz, we will see another fantastic history. Now coming to space shuttle. The space shuttle, as you know, it has got, it takes off as a rocket and then leaves something like an aeroplane like thing in the orbit. So it works when it is in orbit like a spacecraft, and then when it returns like an aircraft and lands on the runway. So that is the fantastic thing. It has to have all the features of a launch vehicle, all the features of a spacecraft, and all the features of an aircraft which will come and land. So its takeoff weight is tremendous, 2050 tons. Okay, 2050 tons to put about 125 tons into orbit. But out of 125, only 20 tons is the payload. This is at 51.6 degrees. As I told you yesterday, when US approached Russia for the cooperation for International Space Station, Russians' condition is obviously that they will launch from Kazakhstan, that is Baikonur, and only 51.6 degrees inclination is acceptable to them. Once it's 51.6 degrees, the space shuttle loses 5 tons. If it is 28 degrees, same space shuttle can put 25 tons into orbit. But once it is 51.6, it can put only 20 tons. That means all this HTV or Columbus or multi-purpose module, all of them have to be within that mass. And it had 135 launches, and out of 135 launches, 36 were purely for ISS. That means 27% of these launches of space shuttle were meant for the ISS. We had in 2003 a terrible accident of Space Shuttle Columbia, in which 7 astronauts died. Out of them, one is Kalpana Chawla of Indian origin, US citizen of Indian origin. What happened was, can you go to previous slide? Forward. Okay, this is the space shuttle. When it was taking off in that particular mission, a insulation piece from here, which is of the size of a suitcase, fell off and then hit one of these wings. And there was a joint there that cracked. And they didn't know that, and it took off. And while returning, of course, some key people knew, because during that, any space shuttle mission is for 13 days with 7 crew, and they will go into the orbit, finish their work and come back. But there were a lot of analysis, what was that piece coming, because photographs have touched, videos have taken. So they did a lot of analysis, and the chief of the mission must be knowing, but we are not sure what will be the implication. Many people felt that it will be a big problem, and many people felt it will not be a problem. But while re-entering, because at re-entry the temperatures can go above 1500 degrees centigrade, and the whole outside will be like a fireball between something like 80 to 40 kilometers of altitude. During that time, gases went in through this crack, and all the 7 astronauts died, and the whole Columbia disintegrated. But the pity was, when they had the space shuttles, just after, and all space shuttles are equipped with a docking module which can dock with International Space Station, except this Columbia. And this Columbia was supposed to be fixed with a docking module after that particular mission. This is the pity which happened, and if it had survived that launch, it could have been another one which would have been serving the ISS. The next. Now in the space shuttle, what happens was the payloads are put here like this, and the doors will be opened. This will attach here. It will attach here to the space station. This is the actual docking system. So that means if the space station is like this, the shuttle will go and attach like this, and then whatever is payload here will be taken and put it on the open side or whatever it is, using the arms which is here, as well as the arms which are on the space station. This is how the shuttle carries. Next. Now, the Soyuz launch vehicle. When we come to Soyuz launch vehicle, it was 1966 it started. So far it had 1700 launches, more than 1700 launches. That means on an average of roughly about 32 launches per year. That means every 12 days one launch on average. On average from 1966 to now, for 55 years, this launch vehicle is taking off every 12 days and taking up either some missions to Salyut, then to Mir, then to space station. Continuously it was serving. It was taking the crew, it was taking the Progress for supply missions, it was taking other satellites which are put into the orbit. So this is actually the Soyuz, when it takes, here of course some details are there which you can see. The total launches of this particular version is 70 with 69 success. Out of 1700 also, success is more than 95%. Okay, and when the Soyuz puts the Soyuz spacecraft into orbit, it used to take 48 hours to dock to the International Space Station. As I told, when you have to take it to the orbit and put it at 400 kilometers orbit, the velocity which you have to achieve is 7.667 kilometers per second, to be exact. 7.667 kilometers per second means from here to Vijayawada you can go in 5 seconds. Okay, that is the speed. That is the speed with which it travels. And when it travels at that speed, it is put in an orbit, and ISS is in another orbit. You have to adjust the phasing, and it has to reach and the dock. Docking I'll just come to later. This used to take 48 hours. During the 48 hours, the 3 cosmonauts or 3 astronauts will be huddled in a 1.2 meter cube of the space. 1.2 meter cube of the space, 3 people will be sitting very huddled for 48 hours. It was very difficult. So, this was because the inclination which it will achieve by the launching is not exactly the same inclination as the space station. And inclination, as I told you, is a function of the latitude of the launch station and the azimuth in which you will launch. From the true north, at what angle you will launch. And at the launch station, there will be some restrictions, some highly inhabited places over which you can't launch. There will be some places where if it falls, there will be a lot of accidents. So they have to avoid. Because of all those problems, it used to do. But this year, what they have done was, they have made a change last year. The rocket, when it takes off, at one particular azimuth, will rotate and go in another direction. It's, of course, this we were doing, we means in ISRO, the people are doing from 1994 onwards, because we learned from them. We learned from all the people. So For this launch vehicle, they have introduced it, and because of this, now in 4 orbits, that means 6 hours, it can dock to International Space Station. From the insertion to the docking, 4 orbits or 2 orbits. 2 orbits means 3 hours. That means the ISS, on ISS, 3 cosmonauts can take off from Baikonur in Russia, go into an orbit of 400 kilometers altitude at 51.6 degrees inclination, and they can have either a R bar or V bar approach. R bar, V bar means if this is the International Space Station which is traveling, if you have to dock, one is coming from behind with a velocity. It's called V bar docking. Second one is called coming from down and then docking. It's called R bar docking. So these 2 things, maneuvers have to be very detailedly designed and detailedly for each one how much velocity to be given has to be done. And all this it does in 3 hours now. That means if you take a flight from Vijayawada, by the time you land in Delhi and come out of the airport, people can go in the Soyuz launch vehicle, in a Soyuz aircraft, and dock with already orbiting International Space Station and go into the space station. This is what is achieved by this launch vehicle, which is working from 1966. Okay, next. Now this is the launch vehicle Soyuz. This one is taking the Progress module without crew. This is taking Soyuz module with crew. When crew is being taken, this is called escape module. What happens is if there is any problem from the takeoff, this portion will be cut off and this portion will take away the whole crew module and land somewhere else. Okay, so this is called crew safety system, crew escape system. But this, there is another luck with this vehicle. This system used to be, when everything is going smooth and there is no problem with any stages of the launch vehicle, and the fire is not breaking out, fire is not spreading, what they will do, they used to disconnect this portion and throw it away when these stages reach burnout. Burnout means when they finish burning. Just 1 year back, what they have done was, they have actually converted this into 1 year, not 1 year, about 2017 end. What they have done was, they retained this separation of this piece was extended till this stage starts burning and take over and run for some time. Then they used to remove this portion and then continue. Okay. In October 18, after so many hundreds of launches, when this was successfully thrown out many times at the time of burnout, the burnout is over, these 4 are separated, one of them went and hit here. And then the second stage started blasting out. Then luckily this portion was still there because they were not disconnected. This had taken away the 2 cosmonauts and landed them 400 kilometers away safely. So this is another luck. 2017 they made a change to the launch vehicle which was existing from 1966, an important change. And in 2018 it came into rescue to save a team which was going to International Space Station. Now the next one you will see is the Japanese launch vehicle called H2B. This H2B launch vehicle, I will say, is a stylish launch vehicle. Its just takeoff weight is 540 tons, but it puts 20 tons in the low Earth orbit, and it puts 6 tons into the GTO. I think no other launch vehicle in the world has got this much good efficiency from the time it takes off to putting it in the orbit. So this is possible because they have got excellent engines both for first stage and second stage, which are called LE5A and LE7A, 7B, which work most of them, which both of them work with the cryogenic propellants, liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. So because of that, it can take off with just 540 tons and put about 19 tons into ISS space station orbit. The next one is Ariane launch vehicle, which is with two solid propellant strap-ons and one heavy cryogenic first stage and then another cryogenic stage. With this, it can take 20 tons to 260 kilometers orbit at 51.6 degrees. And it can put 10 tons in the GTO. You know, this is the most successful, efficient in the commercial market. Each launch of this, the customers have to pay 1400 crores. And so far it had something like more than 100 launches, 109 launches, and out of that 104 are successful. So 109 launches, 104 successful. With each launch they get 1400 crore. Okay, this is the one which is used 5 times to launch their like ATV and other things to ISS. Yesterday some boy was asking why India was not taken into the space station. Is it because of any reasons or any ideological reasons or anything? No, we do not have any of this type of capabilities. If we had this type of capabilities, people would have come with garlands and taken us. Okay, next slide. Now, this is the latest SpaceX. As you know, it's a private company and it uses mainly reusable launch vehicle. That means both stages of it will be coming back after their work is over and it will be recovered on a barge. It will come and land on a barge and then immediately it will be soldered there and it will be brought back, reconditioned and used for the next launch. It had already got 102 launches and out of that 102 launches, 101 are successful. And out of these 101, 45 are refurbished launches. That means they recovered back, cleaned it and tested it and again used it for the launch. Because of that, launch costs come down. This roughly costs about 500 crores for the same capability as the almost Ariane or H2. This one is used to very recently this is used on 16th of November of this year to take the first crew of US to International Space Station. They had a break. After 2011, the space station is, space shuttle was cancelled by US government. After that, there was no space shuttle launch. They were purely dependent only on the Russian launch vehicle Soyuz and Russian launch spacecraft module Soyuz module to take crew from the ground to the International Space Station and to bring them back. But the private company with Falcon 9 launch vehicle, it has achieved for the first time a crew, and they have taken 4 crew members, including one lady, if I am right, and one Japanese. 4 crew members on 16th of November this year and already docked to International Space Station and transferred them to them. Now this is how so many of the launches of Soyuz launch vehicle, Proton launch vehicle, space shuttle are used for assembly, and the Ariane launch vehicle, H2 launch vehicle, Soyuz launch vehicle are used to take the crew as well as the supplies. This is how the International Space Station is assembled. Now when the International Space Station is in orbit, the most important thing for that is power. Let's go. Now, as you have seen in that picture of the International Space Station in all our posters, you will see the big solar panels on both sides. There are 8 solar panels or 4 sets of solar panels. All of them put together have more than 250,000 solar cells. All of them silicon solar cells, because in space normally people do not go for the latest things. People go for proven things, even if they are old technology. Silicon cells are very old technology, but that is proven one and it is taken, and these 262,000 things work at an efficiency of 14%, and generate a peak power of 240 kilowatts and the average power of about 85 to 120 kilowatts, depending upon angle, which I will come to that. Now, this 124 kilowatts of average power is the whole power supply, like your power cables, will be running all through the space station, and from the solar panels, if they come, it's called bus voltage, we call them. Normally, if the bus voltage is high, obviously current will be less. So, higher voltage is preferred. But higher voltage has got its own problem. So, this particular solar arrays have got 160 volts power bus, and all the US systems work at 120 volts DC. And so, there is a DC-DC converter between 160 volts to 120 volts, and all the Russian things work at 28 volts and 120 volts. So, there will be two levels of the conversion and supplying to the loads. Next slide. Now, they also have batteries, because each time a satellite International Space Station goes around the Earth, it takes 92 minutes, I told you. Out of 92 minutes, 35 minutes it will be in the shadow. It will not be receiving the solar power. So, when it is receiving the solar power, it will be charging the batteries, and when it is not receiving, these batteries will supply. So, there are 12 sets of nickel hydrogen batteries, which together will supply 75 kilowatts of power to the space station. That means every orbit, when it is in the sun and when it is in the shadow you have to shed some power shedding, load shedding, so that you will live within 75 kilowatts. And the moment you come back to the light, you have the full power. And these 12 sets of nickel hydrogen batteries have got limited life. So, in 2009, they were once replaced completely. That means the space shuttle launches which go there take experts, the astronauts trained as engineers, and with all these batteries, they remove the batteries and then replace the batteries and make all connections. Again, 2017, 16 and 17, they have replaced all the batteries with lithium ion batteries. Lithium ion batteries, because they have got a much higher charging and discharging capability. 12 sets of nickel hydrogen batteries are replaced with only 6 sets of lithium ion batteries. And these batteries are changed in 2016 and 2017. And the latest one, the last set was sent only this year, June. Okay. Now, there is also a lot of heat generation by the solar panels, and by circulation of ammonia, the heat is brought towards the radiators, and radiators will radiate the whole heat. 2 sets of radiators are there. Total, there are 7 sets of radiators on the International Space Station. They radiate heat into the space. There is one very important thing on the solar panels and the integrated structure. There is something called plasma contactor. That is, when the space, the astronauts go out to work, they should not get a shock from the space, because the voltage difference is high. To make it equal, there is a plasma contactor which shorts the whole International Space Station to the outside space environment. I think this looks surprising to you, because normally what we understand is shorting means taking the third pin and connecting to the ground, grounding the connection, so that we don't get a shock. Similar thing is done only to the space outside. Next. Now, this is the 8 sets of solar panels. You can see here 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. They are on the port side and the starboard side. There are 2 important things. This is called alpha joint or alpha gimbal, which rotates to see that the solar panels track the sun, because they have to continuously looking towards the sun, then only they will get the full power. There is another set of gimbals here at this place, which is called the beta gimbals. They rotate the solar panel such that there will be an angle between the space station orbital plane and Earth to Sun orbital plane, because Earth is rotating around the Sun. That plane is called ecliptic. Between ecliptic and the space station plane, there will be an angle. Because of that angle, there will be some loss of solar power to the solar panels. To adjust that, these gimbals, beta gimbals here, rotate these solar panels towards sun, small adjustment, but the main adjustment is from alpha joint and alpha gimbal. With this, they will rotate. In fact, just after this, you will be seeing a video in which most part of the orbit you will see. I specifically put it because you will see how solar panels rotate in about 60 minutes of time from what you see in the beginning to the end. While seeing that, you also see when the space station is going, what is below on the earth. You will see excellent views of mountain ranges, sea, sand, deserts, everything you will see. So in that video, what you have to see is from beginning to the end, how the solar panels rotate to optimize the power they generate. This is possible because I worked 10 years as the director of the master control facility which controls all the communication satellites. We see in what angle is the solar panel from our computer numbers. I had never seen how in space, there is no possibility, how in space a solar panel rotates to get the maximum power. We only assume, we only see the sensor data, we only see the animation if one of the computer engineers make it. But here you will see solar panels, 8 solar panels of International Space Station generating 120 watts of average, 120 kilowatts of average power, rotating to adjust themselves to the right angle from the sun. Next slide. Now, as I told you, this is the power generated from the solar panels, and it comes here, and this at this point is about 160 volts, and then there will be loads here in case of excess power to dump or to charge the batteries. Then there is alpha gimbal which I told you to rotate. Then there is again converters to supply to US users as well as the Russian segment. Next. Now, yeah, can you go for this? This is the one you watch carefully how the solar panels rotate. While this is actual video of the space station, of course, courtesy NASA. These solar panels you will see rotating through these alpha gimbals and also here through their beta gimbals. Audio is not there. Solar panels rotate. is one of the best videos I have seen. That means for almost 60 minutes, this you have seen just 5 minutes. This video is taken over 16 minutes, 2/3 of one orbit from another flying spacecraft through its windows or cameras and whatever it is, showing how the solar panels rotate and how the alpha gimbal works, how the beta gimbal works, to see that the power is generated. Otherwise, all these things, most of the engineers in the closed door in the AC room, they will be seeing this through some numbers in front of their computer screen. That's all, and assuming. And then if it is lost reference and if something power is not coming, we'll be breaking our heads how to rotate it, which direction we have to give command, how it will achieve the power. All that will be seeing. Okay. Now next one. Now next comes power is over. Now access and coming back. For the access, as I told you, the one which was used between 2003 and 2005 and 2011 and 2020 continuously is the Soyuz spacecraft. It has got 3 modules, which is called orbital module and descent module and a service module. And there is a docking system here which goes and docks. So normally the astronauts will be in this, cosmonauts when they are launched, and then they move here and then dock to the station, and then after docking they open the hatch and go in. While coming back, they detach and they will again move here and then detach and deorbit and come back. Now in this the most important thing was maximum only 3 people they can take. And this spacecraft is roughly about, next slide, can you go? This is 7.25 tons in mass, and it has got something to the space station. It has taken 63 crewed missions, and all of them are successful. And this has got the instrumentation, I mean the middle section where descent module is in the shape of headlight, and in the orbital module will be spheroid, and the bottom portion service module is sealed version. Okay, and the orbital module contains one toilet and then automatic docking system, and crew can sit comfortably in 5 meter cube. This is very important because something happened in one of the deorbiting things which I will come back. But this over 65 years is very successful. As I told you, only twice it failed. In 1967 it failed with the first cosmonaut who was flying in the first Soyuz. It's called Komarov. He died because the parachutes didn't open. And again, Salyut 1 first mission, while they're coming back, the carbon dioxide pumping out valve opened and didn't close, so it completely depressurized. These are the 2 accidents which happened. Otherwise, it is very, very successful one, transferring the people to the spacecraft. Can you go to the next? Now, here you will see 2 views. How the Soyuz will go and dock to the International Space Station. How complicated it is, you can watch. It will be coming, as I told you, either in a V bar, that means coming from behind, or coming from bottom as R bar. This is V bar docking. You will watch this. Okay, can you go? It is 2017 video. These are all videos taken on board, courtesy NASA and Roscosmos.
600 and rage rate is minus what, 0.50? Copy.
This view now from external cameras on the International Space Station. showing the Soyuz MS-07 as it is now just 560 meters away, closing at a rate of 1.5 meters per second, approaching the neighborhood of the station to begin a fly around of 57.8 degrees in angle at a distance of just 1,300 feet. Flying 253 miles over Western Africa, a great view of the Soyuz MS-07, and as you can see in our dueling boxes here, a view from the Soyuz of the International Space Station and the docking port on the Rosviet module. Final approach is expected just moments from now, docking scheduled at 2:43 a.m. Central Time.
About 30 meters is the range, and the range rate is minus 0.16. The target is just 1 degree lower. Copy. And the crosshairs are aligned.
A great view of the Soyuz MS-07 flying over the unmistakable sands of the Algerian desert, moving from southwest to
they were all
northeast.
flying
Now
at
just 30 meters
7.8
away from
kilometers
docking.
per second. Though you are watching it as a slow movement.
So the docking node is 105 squares. The target is in the center, and the crosshairs are aligned.
Astronauts were sitting here waiting for the docking. And this is where the dock, but the target is here. That is, the viewing target is here for camera.
The Soyuz at the correct closure rate of 1/10 of a meter per second, closing in on 25 meters away.
The docking node is 3 squares, so the range is 20 meters visually, 22 according to course, and the range rate is minus 0.12. So, we are monitoring final approach. There is a little bit roll to the right. The target is moving to the left and a little bit down, just 1 degree. The docking node is 4 squares, so the target is on the left and a little bit lower with a roll of about 4 degrees. Copy.
You are seeing the commentary both from Houston and Moscow, simultaneously communicating.
Just below the circular docking port of Rosviet, you can see the docking target itself. The crosshairs on this external engineering camera on the Soyuz will align with that docking target before the final few feet are negotiated by the Soyuz spacecraft.
So the roll is aligning. Copy. So the range is about 10 meters. Crosshairs are aligned. The target is in the center. Copy.
The station and Soyuz about to cross the northern coast of Africa, about to move over the Mediterranean. This view from the high-definition external viewer camera on the International Space Station.
A little bit of roll, and it is aligning. Copy. We are standing by for contact. 3 meters. The target is in the center. Crosshairs are aligned. So we're at page 80, standing by for contact.
Just about 10 meters separating the Soyuz and the station.
Is the range?
Closing in,
Crosshairs are
standing by for contact and capture of the International Space Station.
standing by for contact.
These are the small attitude changes which
Contact confirmed.
Contact confirmed.
Capture confirmed
Copy. Now we have meeting.
at 2:39 a.m. Central Time, 3:39 a.m. Eastern Time, as the Soyuz MS-07 and the International Space Station flew 253 miles over the boot of Italy.
Mechanical contact is 11:39.
This is the video taken from International Space Station side. Same thing taken from the Soyuz side. Next slide, can you go? Yeah. This is view from the Soyuz side where you see the CARS system and also the radar which we'll be seeing. And then there will be small attitude adjustments between the Soyuz and the space station, and it will go on dock. And as you see, both of them are moving at a velocity of 7.667 kilometers per second, with a small difference, and this approaching that, and you can see how that rotates relative to this, to have the correct alignment of the dock. Leaks, and then they open the hatch, and then they go inside, and all these things. Now, this is the access side. Next slide. Now, when it has to come back, it has to de-engage from the space station. The crew from here will move to here. This is very, very critical maneuver because they move here and then get out of the space station by undocking, and the actual re-entry burn, we call it. Re-entry burn is given when it is 12 kilometers away from the space station, because very nearby it should not do, because it will affect space station. So 12 kilometers it will move. The crew will move to here. Previously there was, the sequence was, because you have to see very important thing. For this space station to come back, with the crew to come back, they are in the middle. This engine has to burn properly, and this has to separate, because there are the parachutes here. When it is approaching the earth, the parachutes have to open. If it is connected, or if it is not separated, they are finished, because parachutes don't open. Or if this deorbit burn, if this engine doesn't fire, they are finished. So they are in the middle. Okay, this is a very, very critical thing. So the earlier combination was, they used to separate from the station and separate they used to separate this module and then fire the engine and then come back. So in one of the missions in 1988, September, when it was coming out from the mere, it has come out of the mere, it has separated it. Along with this, the hatch also will be separated. So once separated, it can't dock back. And when it is about to fire this engine, its computer software problem came and it failed. And there was no way to command this. So it took 24 hours for them to correct it. So the deorbit burn took 24 hours. And in this place, there is no toilet, there is no water supplies, and there is a very limited place for the 3 people to sit, and it was terrible, and they spoiled everything there themselves. But they repaired the computer software, and then fired the engine and came back and landed somewhere else in an unplanned way. So after that, the sequence is changed, that the whole thing together they will fire. They will disengage, then they will fire here, then they will separate this. After firing is confirmed, they will separate it. If firing is not confirmed, the other station side should come near and get it docked and take them out. That sequence is followed. Actually, for the deorbit burn, is very carefully calculated because it depends upon the initial velocity, and the re-entry interface we define as 122 kilometers above Earth. At 122 kilometers above Earth, at what velocity it has to come and at what angle it has to come to the local horizontal. Normally, for the space, for this Soyuz, the initial velocity is 7.8 kilometers per second, and the velocity with which it has to enter the atmosphere re-entry interface is 1.07 kilometers per second, and the angle at which it has to be to the local horizontal is 3 degrees. And if for that, for these conditions, it has to burn and give a deorbit velocity of 143 meters per second. If it is correct angle, it is put at 12 kilometers away from International Space Station, and at correct angle, if it fires at 7.85 kilometers per second initial velocity, it will approach 122 above the Earth, which is called re-entry interface, at an angle of 3 degrees below the local horizontal and with a velocity of 1.07 kilometers per second. In that case, it comes, enters the atmosphere, bumps once, and then enters the atmosphere and correctly lands at where it is supposed to land. Of course, after going through the whole process of re-entry heat, which is fireball outside, reaching very high degrees of temperature, which the heat shield will protect. Then when it comes to 9 kilometers altitude, the parachutes will be released, and parachutes will bring down the velocity from 240 meters per second to 90 meters per second. And when it comes to 7.5 kilometers per second, bigger parachutes will be released again to bring it down to very small value of 6 meters per second. And when it is just about to land, there will be solid motors which will be fired to make it land at roughly 3 meters per second velocity. It will land on the ground. Okay. Of course, that you will see in a video tomorrow, when how the astronauts will come out of the space station, enter the Soyuz, get disconnected, fire their engines, and come back and land. There will be another video tomorrow. This is how it comes back. Next. Now there are other systems. The next, this is over. Okay, there are Progress spacecraft which takes roughly 2.4 tons of the cargo to the space station. Next. And when you use the next, you can go. And with the ATV is roughly 20 tons. It can take about 7.5 tons of supplies. That is water, food, gases, and the propellant to the space station. Next. The HTV again. Next. The HTV, if you take it, that is again, it has got about 19.5 tons payload. With that, it can take the lot of systems. And here, one important thing is this HTV doesn't dock anywhere. It just goes with the small engines. It will go approach the space station very near, and the space station arm will capture it and then put it on the space station truss. After that, astronauts will go, or they will manipulate the arm to take it and position it at the right place. You can see the next. Here the HTV comes here and the arm captures it and puts it on the truss here, or at the designated location. Can you go to next? Now this is again whatever I showed you, exploded view of International Space Station. Because of the two-dimension picture, this ITS should be actually here, because this portion is connected over Destiny, so it should be here. And this is the Russian orbital segment, this is the US orbital segment, and these are the solar panels of US made and the integrated truss structure, and these are all the things which are taken and assembled there. One important thing is, because at the altitude at which the International Space Station is going, there are number of debris as well as the meteors. The designs are like this. The outside design is 1 millimeter of aluminum, and inside that there will be 2 layers of Kevlar and Nextel, and after that there will be 3.2 mm wall of aluminum wall. And if it is an important place like Destiny Space Station, which is forward in the path, it will be 4.8 mm. So that the criteria, design criteria for them is, for 1 centimeter or less object hits it, it should be safe. For 1 to 10 centimeter, if it goes in, the internal layer should protect it. And above 10 centimeter, you have to divert the station so that it doesn't come and hit them. These are their design guidelines. Next. Now you will see this last one of how do they work in the space, and with this today's talk will complete, and tomorrow completely dedicated to crew, their research
And rub it
work.
in. Again, kind of working it out to the ends. And I like to take my towel while I have the shampoo in there and just kind of work it. Because without standing under running water, you kind of need to use the towel a little bit to help get some of the dirt out.
And that's it. Thank you.
His bath is over.
It's a great sleeping bag. And what's really cool about it is we can zip it up, and then we have little armholes.
What's on the menu tonight?
Strawberry shortcake. We
Oh.
have these butter cookies and some strawberries with a little bit of milk on top.
And Chris, I'm gonna make one for you right here. And here's your strawberry shortcake ready for you, Chris.
Oh, excellent.
Thanks for the help, Chris. That was awesome.
More?
Okay, I'm going to toss this. This works. Usually, get the honey coming out pretty well there. There we go.
Yeah, there is no gravity,
just the right
doesn't fall,
amount.
it will float. There they can easily move 1 ton of
Might have to use that as well.
station
We've had to
easily.
use that 1 ton, which is a little bit scary inside of a spaceship using a ball peen hammer, but it's done a good.
This is the self-navigating robo developed, which in future is going to help astronauts very well. The small one which looks like football.
Here comes Luca. Now let's try backwards.
I see it. Nicely stuck. Could be a good thing. You got her
Yeah, but
stuff.
it was in the way.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. I would suggest that I open these. Thank you. These come matched.
All right.
Thanks for the honor, guys. I really appreciate that. No, I really do.
Look back at me, look good. How's she look?
Kinda cold.
This they are all packing into the system which is coming down. This is the exercise. They have to attach like this, otherwise they will fly away. They have to attach like this when they are doing exercise, otherwise they will fly away. Okay. Now go forward. Okay, last, previous. Okay, that ends today's talk. Actually, during the lockdown, we were all in the houses, not coming out. Just think of the people who are going there to space station, which is equivalent to a 5-bedroom house, all doors locked and sealed. They have nothing except windows to see outside, and they have nothing unless something comes and docks there to give them the food and other things required for the. And 6 months they have to live with the same people with a okay, I will say crowded, but the other people say it's a comfortable space station. It's definitely comfortable space station compared to Salutes. So in that space they have to work 6 months. They have to live, they have to work without any other contact except ground contact. So tomorrow's lecture will cover completely about the crew, how they will be trained on the ground for all these things, how they will be doing work there, and what type of work they do, what type of research they do, and what are the other most important thing, how is the oxygen generated, carbon dioxide removed, food supplied, water supplied to them, and how water is recycled from wastewater. All these things tomorrow's lecture will cover. With that we will be completing a special celebratory lectures on space station 20 years of continuous presence. I especially thank NASA and YouTube because they have made everything public domain, and Mr. Ravindranath, one of my former colleagues and who was a former chief librarian in 2-3 centers in ISRO, who had supplied me many documents to study and understand, and Mr. Chandrasekhar of MCF Hassan, who had excellent designs of all the slides, videos, specially selected videos which will show both professionals as well as youngsters what is there in the inside space station and its working. And to all of you, Vijnan team, for your good support for this lecture. Thank you very much.
We'll now proceed further for the interactive session. If any students would like to ask questions, you may.
People either fully understand, who don't understand anything will not ask questions. Okay, so either if you are fully understood, you need not ask, or if you have not at all understood also, you need not ask. Okay, but I want all of you to ask questions. Every question looks silly in the beginning, doesn't matter.
Good evening, sir. This is Shekhar from Final Year Food Technology. Sir, my question here is that,
Go ahead.
there are bodily fluids, aging of cells, and yesterday in the case of Sunny Williams, in that video clip, we saw taking a water droplet, like this highly surface tensed big water droplet. Means up to the buccal cavity it can enter. Means what is the force that drives to the gut or gastrointestinal tract here? Means our aging will not affect, or how the, means for example if you consider the kidney function there, to function the nephrons we need gravitational force, where the gravity is very less. How actually the kidney works, or how the bodily fluids flow? That is my question. Yeah.
I'm not the right person who can answer, but there is one book written, because one medical doctor is sent on to the International Space Station, or I think, I'm not sure, International Space Station or Space Shuttle. He had written a book called Off the Planet, OFF, Off the Planet. He had written lot of things about the medical things, what happens to the body and other things. Of course, tomorrow you will see major things like cardiovascular, the bones and muscle atrophy and such things you will see, and what to do. But if you want more details, I suggest that book to read. Okay?
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Sir, we have a question from online viewers.
Yeah.
Mr. Lakshmi Narasimha Rao has asked a question that for critical operations like docking, can you please throw some light on the role of onboard computers in the prevailing and emerging scenario of artificial intelligence?
Most of the dockings between the Soyuz and the space station, or between the space shuttle and the space station, were fully automatic. Computers and radars and instrumentation does it. Actually, the astronauts sit. You may not be knowing, many of you who fly on the aircrafts, your pilot most of the time doesn't fly anything. He just sits there. He puts autopilot on. Only during the takeoff and landing he comes into picture. Many of the European countries, even landing also is automatic. He need not have to do anything, he has to sit. Just like that, the dockings are mostly done by computers, radars, automatically. There is only one case in Russia where the docking has to be done automatically, but the cosmonaut had disconnected or disabled the automatic computer docking and manually docked excellently, precisely. They said very good, and after 4 months he came down and he is terminated. His services are terminated because he had not followed the ground instruction of going only with automatic docking. He had violated it and he had done on his own. When he questioned it, they told, today you are done docking, ignoring the ground control. Tomorrow if you do another operation like this, you may be risking the whole space station. So most of these dockings are automatic.
And we have one more question from Mr. Raja Reddy, sir.
Yeah.
How does the space station take care from the space debris?
Yeah, Mr. Raja Reddy was former controller of SHAR and currently the chief of telecom in Telangana state, and he has asked this question. Actually, for the space station, the limits are like this. Any bigger object entering into 15 kilometer by 15 kilometer by 15 kilometer cube, then it is danger. And if it is slightly crossing that, the space station has to move away. At least in an year, about 5 to 6 crash avoidance maneuvers are carried out by the space station people by moving away a few tens of kilometers, either up or down or in an angle, and then come back to their real orbit. But as I told you, the space debris covers from 1 mm or less than 1 mm to big ones like big satellites coming and hitting. So the small ones I already told you, the design itself takes care. Outside 1 mm aluminum, inside 2 layers of Nextel and Kevlar cloth, then 3.2 mm of aluminum wall. This will take care up to 10 centimeters of the debris hitting. Nothing will happen to the space station. If anything beyond, it has to be maneuvered away from the oncoming debris, then come back regular trajectory. Now, from ground stations, they compute what is the trajectory of the debris and what is the trajectory of the space station, and then inform them that this is the conjunction point and you have to avoid it. At least it will be informed a few hours earlier, 12 to 13 hours earlier, not very short notice.
Sir, this is Ravi Shekhar.
Yeah.
Actually, you told that from solar panels you take the energy and radiate. What kind of, suppose if it is heat should be dissipated, there should be some atmosphere or something. In space there is nothing of that sort. How it will radiate?
Radiation, because outside is all cool, you know. If you see, in the space, outside is on, most of the space is cool. In the sense, unless the sun side will be very hot, and it will be plus 200 degrees centigrade.
Okay.
On the shadow side, it will be minus 200 degrees centigrade. And most of the radiators are put on the shadow on the cool side. So what happens was, any heat, the heat ammonia takes from inside electronics, and inside the things, as I told you, each crew will be radiating 137 watts, will be not radiating, he will be dissipating 137 watts of heat. So 6 people together, 1 kilowatt of heat, they will dissipate every day. So that heat is to be taken out through a water loop of heat exchanger inside, and after that another heat exchanger with ammonia, and that heat will go to the radiator, and from radiator to the cool side of the space.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
This is Vamsi Krishna from second year.
Yeah.
Actually, in present time, many scientists are saying that Earth is undergoing geographical reversal.
You remove the mask and talk, no problem.
In present time, many scientists are telling that it is undergoing geomagnetic reversal. Does it affect the satellites that are revolving around the Earth, sir?
If it happens, a lot of things will happen, okay? Not only there, on the ground also. So, let's not discuss that because it is not conclusive scientific thing still, okay?
Sir, I have another question.
Yes.
What if a satellite goes out of the orbit, how can we get it back into the orbit, sir?
No, it's normally once satellite goes into the orbit means at a particular velocity, if it is put into orbit, it can be in the right orbit or wrong orbit first. If it is in the wrong orbit, if there is a propellant in the satellite, we can fire the propellant. Normally what happens is, if you are in an elliptical orbit and if you have to come to a circular orbit, what you have to do is you have to do one engine firing, onboard engine firing. Engine means the propellants and then combustion, and which gives velocity. One engine firing when it is at perigee, and another engine firing when it is at apogee, and slowly correct it to make circular. So for that you have to spend the propellant. But more important thing is, if an orbiting satellite goes out of control, means automatic, if its angles change and suddenly it loses all the power, suddenly it loses the control. That type of things are very difficult to control, but if you can bring it back within 20 hours, satellite survives. Okay. So when I was director MCF, we had such a terrifying problems with the satellites. Sometimes we were on the verge of losing satellites after doing 15, 16, 18 hours of continuous operations. At the last moment, sometimes we recovered. And most of the time, all the satellites which have gone into emergency, we have recovered. And operated for years together. That requires lot of calculations, lot of simulation, and lot of thinking which commands to be given, how the solar panels are to be correctly pointed towards sun, how the antennas have to be correctly pointed towards earth, all that has to be done. And during that time, of course, the traffic gets disturbed. Traffic means either your TV channels or the network channels, all these channels get disturbed, and once it comes into normal orbit, everything will be okay. Right?
Sir, one last question, sir.
Right.
What is the percentage of human sustainability on Mars planet? And is there any chance that we can live on the Mars planet in future?
I hope you will live, okay? Not me, okay? So, right now there is still not a decision. Decision means conclusive decision, because, see, to go to Mars, it takes 10 months. Right now, with the available technologies, it takes 10 months. Then once you land on the Mars, you have to work at 1/3 of the gravity force which is available on the ground, on the earth. And you have to work in an atmosphere where 97% is carbon dioxide, whereas on the earth 0.03% is carbon dioxide. And then we do not know whether still there is water, and there is water below the surface, how much water. There is water, but what type of water and other things is not known. Then afterwards, you have to wait on Mars for 2 years to get a correct opportunity to come back to Earth. Then you have to travel 10 months back to Earth. Then you have to land here. After that landing, if you are still alive, people will take you to your home. Okay?
Sir, we have a question from Mr. Ravi Saxena in online.
Yeah.
Why there is no mention of ESA Space Lab in the heritage section? He would like to know. Is there any?
I didn't mean to leave it. The Space Lab actually had only hardly 200 days of space station heritage. The Space Lab of USA was definitely, yes, it's a heritage. It doesn't mean, my not mentioning it doesn't mean anything. Whereas, compared to Salutes, which were worked for 10 years, and compared to Mir, which worked for 15 years, the 200 days or so of the Space Lab, I thought, is not that, I mean, in this 1 hour, a time, according to the GS, if I calculate, it will come to less than a few minutes. That's why I have not mentioned it. That is the only reason.
Sir, one more, sir. Sir, if we want to take a diversion of the IAS, can we do it, sir, without any obstacles? Like, they'll be moving in an orbit around the Earth. So if we want to take a diversion and we want to go to perpendicular to the direction what they are going through, can we do it, sir, without any obstacles?
It requires lot of energy. You can do anything. It requires lot of energy means in terms of propellant mass, and the engines, you have to fire them, and you have to fire such engines, and you have to fire, think of 420 tons, you have to take it to rotation. Okay, all this has to be done. It is possible, but not with the propellant which is stored now on ISS, or with the type of engines which the Zvezda is having on the space station. With those things, it's not possible.
Okay, sir. One last, sir. There is Elon Musk in USA, SpaceX. Just now we had an example, and Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin, who is a CEO of Amazon. They are extensive in using space technologies, as they are capitalized already, private sector. Sir, can't India, with the help of the capitalism, means we are liberating now after 1991 of LPG reforms, and we are converting many public sector undertakings into private sector. You know, why can't India do this space privatization? Why cannot produce a individual like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos? Is that possible, sir, with this indigenous technology that we have?
Yeah, it's possible. That's why our current Prime Minister is trying, and I wish all the best to all of them. And but you should know, from 1963 to now, it is the government organization ISRO which had led the space activities and brought it from nothing to this level. And we definitely wish anybody who contributes his money, who doesn't expect the money to come from government, he puts in as an addition to government's money to advance space sector will be welcome, and he will be contributing to the progress of space field in India.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
We'll close the session for now.
Good evening to everyone present here. I'm Sabiha. I take it a privilege to propose the oath of thanks for this wonderful occasion. It's a matter of immense pride for me to convey my deep sense of gratitude to the Vice Chancellor, Dr. M.Y.S. Prasad, for proposing this occasion and delivering some very valuable insights. I express my heartfelt thanks to the Department of CSE, ECE, IT Services, and everyone involved for this valuable contributions in bringing about this great lectures. Let me also take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the internal dignitaries, staff, and students for their presence over here. It definitely has to be made a point to thank the online participants, students, and industrialists alike for this immense interest they have taken to attend this very intrigued sessions. Last but not the least, I thank all the students present here for their immense contributions for making this event a great success. Thank you.
I request all the boys to leave from behind the behind door and all the girls from the front doors.
I request everyone